Hey folks, Martin here, and I'm back with another one of my print and play tutorial videos, although this one isn't really going to be a tutorial, it's more of a comparison. So here's the setup. I have a whole bunch of laminated card sheets that I produced yesterday for my current build of a print and play game called Escape From Innsmouth, which is on BGG right now, and I will put a link in the comments below. So I figured, since I actually have to cut these sheets anyway, then why don't I take this opportunity to use a different tool and method to cut each sheet, show that procedure, and then afterward talk a little bit about the pros and cons of using that cutting method. And then we'll kind of wrap it all up at the end and summarize my opinions about each cutting method, and then maybe I'll rank them as a personal ranking, and hopefully that might help you out in making your decision about what you're going to use to cut your print and play card sheets. So, without further ado, let's get to the cutting. Okay, so the first stop in our tour of cutting implements to be able to cut your card sheets, I'm going to use a handheld rotary trimmer, in this case my Fiskars handheld rotary trimmer, a cork back metal ruler. The reason why it has cork is because that allows it to adhere or to not slip as you are laying it down on the surface to be cut. And of course, our self-healing mat. In this case, this is my Alpha rather large self-healing mat. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and position my camera and start cutting this sheet. My first impression here as I take a look at the cards that I have produced using this method is that they are pretty good. So here's the thing, right? I mean, the sheet has cutting guides, right? You see these guides over here on the x-axis and y-axis. Let me get closer so that you can see what the cutting guides are. And what I try to do when I'm cutting is I try to cut within the bounds or within the margins of the sheet, and I don't try to cut the cutting guides. And that was hard to do with this method because it's not very easy to tell, because of the rotary nature of the blade, where it's actually going to stop in relation to the edge of the paper. So it's very easy to overshoot kind of that mark and cut off the paper, just go right through the edge, or undercut, and not cut all the way to the edge of the component or the card. So that was the drawback of me using this. Now, the advantage is that it's very precise, right? As long as you're careful and you line up your ruler, it's very precise in terms of how it lines up with the cutting guides, as long as you're able to preserve the cutting guides. One other drawback of this style for me is that it requires a little bit more effort to be able to use. Like, you can't really use it sitting down. You have to stand up. At least in my case, I feel like I have to stand up. All right, next up, we're going to try to use what's called or at least what I call a guillotine cutter to produce this next sheet of cards. And so let's get started. All right, so let's take a look at the cards that I produced using this guillotine or swing arm cutter. So the first thing I'll mention from a advantage standpoint is that there's very little effort required to use a swing arm cutter. Especially a good one, right? Because especially if you're only cutting one sheet like this, it's pretty fast. And the cuts that I produced are pretty well aligned. Now, in terms of drawbacks, sometimes it's tougher to align your thing that you're cutting with this edge where the blade is going to pass, such that if you can see here, on some of these cards, I have a little bit of white edge or white strip. Right, there's another one there. There's a minor one there. Now, this isn't serious enough for me to want to redo these cards, but it is something that I'll call out. At least in my opinion, it's a little bit harder to get very precise, very aligned cuts using a swing arm or guillotine style cutter. The other thing with this style of cutter is of necessity, it's going to cut all the way through from the start of the paper all the way to the end of the paper. So it will cut off your cutting guides. So if your cutting guides are not designed to still have a little bit remaining after you cut off most of it with the guillotine cutter, then it's going to be more of a challenge for you, a little bit harder for you to align exactly where you're supposed to be cutting and get that accuracy and precision. Now, proponents, people who are fans of swing arm cutters or guillotine cutters say, well, you just have to be more careful. And that's true. If you are more careful, you can get better aligned cuts with a swing arm cutter. I'm just saying that it's a little bit more challenging in my experience to get. All right, so here's the next sheet that I want to cut today, and here's the next cutting tool that I'm going to demo for you. So this is called the Fiskars Rotary Bypass Paper Trimmer, and it's by far the kind of most expensive cutting tool that I have in my arsenal. This is about $130, as I recall. You call it a rotary bypass trimmer because if you look in there, you see there's actually a rotary blade, very similar to the rotary blade in the handheld rotary paper trimmer that I was using earlier. So let's set up and then let's see how we use this Fiskars rotary bypass trimmer to cut this next card sheet. All right, so let's take a look at the cards that we produced using this Fiskars Rotary Bypass Paper Trimmer. So at first glance, I would say that they're slightly more precise in terms of cutting alignment than the guillotine or the swing arm cutter, although I do notice that I have some cards here that have a little bit, a strip of white where I passed the blade. So that leads me to the pros and cons of this cutter as I see them. The advantages of this cutter are it requires, I think, even less effort than the guillotine cutter or the handheld rotary trimmer to produce the cuts, right? So it's very, very easy to use, requires little effort. The main drawback for this one, just like the swing arm or guillotine cutter for me, is that it's a little bit tougher to line up your cutting guides with the channel where the blade is going to pass. And so that can lead to you have to be more careful and you have to exert more effort to get good alignment, perfect alignment with your cutting here. But if you can afford it, this is a great option, I think. And I'm very happy to have it. And if I'm cutting a lot of cards, then this is probably going to be my go-to. It's also good for cutting thicker materials. So 1.5 millimeter, 2 millimeter tiles. I could also use this. I have the option of using this Fiskars Rotary bypass paper trimmer. Okay, so here's what I'm saving the best for last, in my opinion. Okay, this is and you've seen me use this before in other videos. This is called the Fiskars Shortcut Portable Trimmer. And unlike the cutters that I've used previously, this doesn't use a rotary blade. And it doesn't use a guillotine style blade. It uses just a straight edge, a very small straight edge underneath there. And then you slide. So I call this a slide style trimmer. So you slide this blade down this channel, and then that's how it produces the cuts. Now, the other thing that I like about this is that, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's actually a guide wire right down the middle of this channel here where the blade is going to pass. So you can use that guide wire to line up with the cutting guides on the sheet that you're going to be cutting, and that's how you can produce more accurate cuts, by lining up the guide wire with the cutting guides. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cut down this sheet into cards using this Fiskars Shortcut portable trimmer. All right, so let's take a look at the cards that I produced using this Fiskars Shortcut portable paper trimmer. So offhand, I would say that in terms of aligned cuts, cutting the blade passing where exactly I wanted it to pass, I think this was the easiest tool for me to achieve that. So I would put that definitely in the advantage or the pros column because of this guide wire that I mentioned, right? So this guide wire, as I said, makes it really easy to line up where the blade is going to cut with the cutting guides that are printed on the sheet. And then the other thing is that of all the 4 different cutters that I've taken a look at in this video, this is the only one that actually makes it very easy to lift the blade and then set it down inside the margins of the paper so that I can actually cut with precision and start inside a margin, stop inside the margin, and thereby preserve the cutting guides that are around the edges of the sheet. So this is the tool that makes it easiest to preserve cutting guides so that you can line them up with the guide wire and follow. Now the other nice thing about this for me is that it also requires the least effort to be able to use. It's very, very easy to use. I can actually be sitting down as I'm cutting, which is helpful if you're cutting a lot of cards, right? I can just take this, move it in front of the TV, put it on a TV tray, and then just be cutting cards while I am watching TV or that sort of thing. So it takes a lot of the drudgery out of the procedure of producing a lot of cards. Now the drawbacks for this one, it's very light duty. I wouldn't use it to cut more than 2 or 3 sheets of laminated cardstock. In fact, 2 is probably pushing it. I don't use it for that purpose. So it's not going to cut a lot of things, and it doesn't cut thick materials. But it's also pretty cheap. So that's another thing I'll put in the advantages category of everything, all the cutting tools I've shown you today. This is the cheapest one. So that's another nice thing about it. Okay, so let's summarize, wrap it all up, and see how I would rank these 4 different cutting tools that I showed off today and how they stack up against each other. So at number 4, I will place this guillotine cutter, or this swing arm cutter. So on the plus side, it's easy to use. It's very little effort to be able to cut items. On the minus side, it's, for me, the toughest to get the most aligned cuts, knowing exactly where your blade is going to cut in relation to the sheet of cards, which is what I generally find myself cutting most of the time. The other thing is that you have to be standing up when you're using it. I mean, you could use it sitting down, but I don't know, just because of the way the arm is and whatever, I prefer to use it standing up. So long story short, this is a great option, but for me, it's number 4, swing arm cutter. So what would I consider number 3? So this actually surprised me when I thought about it, but number 3 is I'm going to put my beloved, and I love this, my Fiskars Precision Rotary Bypass Trimmer at the number 3 spot. This is easier to use than the swing arm cutter. It's also slightly, okay, I have to be honest, the drawback is it's just as challenging to know exactly where the blade is going to pass. So it's harder to get very precise cuts with this one. And it pains me to say that because I love this so much, and I'm happy to have it. And if I'm cutting a lot of cards, if I have to produce a lot of cards in a short amount of time, I will still use this one. But I have to be honest and say that it's harder to get very aligned, very precise cuts. So number 2 of the ones that I've talked about today, I'm going to put a handheld rotary cutter, metal corkback ruler, and a self-healing mat, which you can't see right now because it's underneath the camera lens. Why number 2? Let me make this clear. This system is, I think, the most precise. If you want the most precise way to cut print and play components, cards, and whatnot, then for me, there's no better option than a rotary handheld cutter, a metal corkback rule, and a ruler and a self-healing mat. You can align your cuts with a great amount of precision. This tool, especially when you keep the blade sharp, requires, it can cut through pretty much anything. And the other nice thing about this is if you're cutting thick materials that require a lot of precision, so tiles and boards and things of this nature, then this is what you want to go to. Now, the drawbacks of a system like this is it does require a lot of skill and a lot of practice to get to learn how to use properly. I remember that when I was learning how to use these things, it took me just forcing myself to use these over a period of about 20 or 25 different print and play builds before I finally felt comfortable enough using them. So there's a learning curve, and you know, and some people are actually concerned that there's a safety issue. I will say that that you could potentially cut yourself while you're using this. I will say that if you learn how to use it properly, then there's very little danger of that. But I will acknowledge that some people feel that, you know, something like this, a setup like this, is a little bit more dangerous. But the most accurate, but also requires a lot of effort to use. Probably the most effort, just because there's, you know, you have to manually align the cuts yourself. You have to be standing up. You have to be standing over the workbench, those types of things. So most accurate, but also a lot of effort to use. So for me, number 1, in terms of ease of use, accuracy, great balance between, I am going to select my Fiskars Shortcut portable trimmer. You've heard me talk about this before. You can use it while sitting down. The guide wire that's here in this channel makes it very easy to line up where your blade is going to cut to the edges of the cards. And you can take this in front of the TV, you can plop it down there, you can be watching a show, and you can be cutting your sheets that way. So for me, this tool features the best balance of ease of use and also accuracy. Let me be clear, it's not quite as accurate in cutting as a rotary paper trimmer, but this requires a lot more effort and preparation and practice to use. So if you want something that's easy to use, yet also very accurate, I recommend the Fiskars Shortcut Portable Slide Style Paper Trimmer. Now, I haven't mentioned the biggest drawback of this slide style paper trimmer is that the blade can get dull after a while. So you have to purchase replacements or have replacement blades in stock. And when the blade starts feeling dull, when the cutting starts requiring more effort, you have to replace that blade. But bottom line, Fiskars Shortcut Portable Trimmer, to me, is the best balance of accuracy and ease of use. And the other thing I will mention is that of the 4 tools that I've shown you today, this one is the least expensive one. So that's it. That's my roundup of 4 different styles of cutting tools for your print and play projects. I hope that that has been helpful for you. Until next time, this has been Martin. Thanks for watching.